Okay, we welcome in our next guest, longtime stage manager at Entertainment Tonight. You know him from the original, the first ever heavy metal fanzine in the United States. The new Heavy Metal Review is heavily involved in that. Associate producer on the original Metal Massacre record. He's also amazing performance in the Metal Massacre documentary, which you can see on Thunderflix at the moment. Also, he's the guy that ran into Lars Ulrich in December 1980 at a Michael Schenker show, and the rest is kind of history from there. Mr. John Kornarens, how are you, sir?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I was thinking the other day, so did we first meet at a country club swap meet? I forget which one it was.
We met at the one across from the Capitol Records.
Capitol Records. Okay. I couldn't remember if it was
yeah.
Capitol or the one in Reseda.
Yeah. I found your number in this little fanzine at Moby Disc, and wasn't your prefix at 345 or something?
The phone number is 347-6448.
Okay. Yeah, I met you, I think, in November of '80 because you had a really good tape collection.
Yes.
I had to get some live Scorpion stuff, so I had to go down and meet you.
I remember that part of it, yeah. And then obviously we got into the new wave of British heavy metal, and like I mentioned, you met Lars, and then a few days later, all three of us were hanging out. We kind of became the three musketeers of the new wave of British heavy metal in LA at the time.
Yep.
It's insane. It's still weird thinking back to like when all that stuff happened, and just three kids, and who knew how insane Lars's career was going to go. I can't remember if you were there, but I was at his townhouse where his parents lived, in his room, and he had a drum set that wasn't even put together, just pieces of the drums sitting on the floor. And I'm like, what is that for? He's like, I'm going to start a band. Like, yeah, sure you are, Lars.
Well, he had the front room, looked over the tennis courts. His parents had the back room, and there was a middle room that was empty. And so I was over there one day in his room, and he goes, hey, I want to show you something. And we go to the middle bedroom, and he goes to open the door, and it goes kunk, and it hits something. I go, that room's empty. What's in there? And I squeezed in, and there's this drum kit. And I go, what's this for? And he goes, I'm going to learn how to play drums and start a band. Same thing he told you. And I said, really? And he gets behind the drums and he starts playing. And I said, dude, stop, man. That's a common wall. You're going to get your family kicked out of here. What are you doing? and he just kept going. It was so loud. I said, whatever. And I left the room and I closed the door, went back in and looked at some of his Danish pornos or whatever and his records, and he was in there just flailing away. And I just couldn't believe this guy. What a nut, drum kit in a townhouse.
Yeah, well, he was always interesting because he was a couple years younger than we were. And I remember we'd all, go travel all over the place to record stores to hopefully find something in there from the new wave of British heavy metal, something cool. But he was always out of the car before I could even get the keys out of the ignition, because he knew there was, if there's anything in there, there might only be one thing, and three people aren't going to get the one thing. So he was a maniac.
Well, he kind of destroyed your face one day. You came to my parents' house in Studio City. We went down to Newport Beach, and we were driving around Long Beach, and I think we went to Zed's and then Music Mart.
Yep.
I was in my Scirocco, and I was driving. You're in the passenger seat, and he's sitting behind you, and I'm literally rolling in a parking spot, and he's clicking the seat forward, shoving you into the windshield. Your glasses are coming off, and he's got the door open, and he's running out. And that little bastard's in there getting the only copy of whatever's in there that we all want.
Yeah, yeah.
And you're just looking at me, shaking your head, going, "Oh my God, this guy's out of control." So,
yeah, but I mean, look, it served him well, because if he wants something, he usually is able to get it.
Yeah.
And that was in 1981 when he went to England in the summer, which both of us were very upset about because we couldn't go, but he had the means to go, and that I think really kickstarted everything, because he hung out with the Diamond Head guys and Motorhead, and that's, I think, when he came back trying to put together a band, which wasn't very successful for a while.
No, but it was more successful because it was on a record, and if you're on a record back in the day, that's how you start getting gigs. Right?
Even before that, though, I remember he had jammed with James a couple of times, and James
before he went to Europe. Yes,
he's like, yeah, this kid really isn't very good, and yada yada. And then when
I'm
Lars
not feeling it, is what he said.
And then when Lars came back, and I think he talked to you first and said, hey, there's this album you guys are doing.
No, what he did. What he did, you twisted my arm to start writing for the fanzine, and I'm glad you did, because I didn't like writing, but once I started, it was fun.
Yeah.
And a few months later, you come to me and you go, hey, let's do a record like Metal for Mothers. And so that's how Metal Massacre starts. So Lars comes back, I think in the fall of September, maybe early October, and I get a phone call, and he called and he says, "Hey, I hear you're doing a record with Brian." I said, "Yeah." He goes, "I want to be on it." I said, "You don't have a band." He goes, "Well, I'm going to start putting something together with James." I said, "Can I have a slot? Can I have a slot?" I said, "Okay, it's okay with me, but you call Brian and make sure it's okay with him." And he called you, and you gave him the thumbs up, and then you called me and said, "Oh, he's just, just deal with him. He's annoying me. I got too many other people to deal with." and so it kind of just, fell in my lap, what little I did, but it was going down to Norwalk a couple times and watching them work up this song and stuff. So
yeah,
and that's why the first version has an explosion, because I did say to Lars, we've given you the last position on the record, so have some kind of an explosion like the end of a Bach or Beethoven concerto, or the end of like a live Judas Priest concert, but have some big out. And so what they did is they took the amp and threw it on the ground. And so that's what that explosion is. Only on the first pressing. After that, it was gone. So
yeah.
keep your copy if you got one.
It did it has reappeared over time.
Sure.
When we did the 20th anniversary box set, Metal Blade box set, they were kind enough to they actually wanted to put the original version in. So it's there, but it's all over the internet now if you want to go back and listen to it. The funny thing about that, so yeah, and honestly, one of the reasons why I said yes was, number one, he was my friend, and it was like, okay, sure. And number two is I needed bands. So it's like, if we can get an extra band in here, they can record something, sure. Not knowing anything about if it was going to be any good or not.
Exactly. We never heard it till the day of mastering.
Yeah, no clue. So then we go to the infamous day of the mastering, and both of us had been telling Lars, like, okay, here's the final day. Like, if you don't have the track in by this day, it's not going to be on the record. And we had it got to the point where we were in the studio mastering this thing and still waiting for Lars to show up with this tape. And this is, of course, before cell phones and all of that nonsense. So we told him when to be there, but we literally had no idea if he was going to show up or not.
Well, I remember we were on the sidewalk waiting for him.
Yep.
He parked where the old Jack in the Box is, and I think the session was 11 to 3 because you have the receipt over at the museum.
Yep.
So I think it was in the morning, but I don't remember. But I know it was like 15 minutes before the session was starting. And he comes running up panic, and you go to him. You just go, "Where is it?" And he pulls out a cassette out of his back pocket. So, similar to something like this, a non-chrome tape. And you go, "Where's the $50?" And he goes, "I thought you're paying." And you guys started arguing about who's paying the $50 for the transfer from cassette to quarter-inch.
Well, we didn't even get to that because he brought the tape in, and then we went in and gave it to the mastering engineer, and he said, "Yeah, we have to bump this up, and it's going to cost $50." And then we were kind of like, "Okay." None of us had nobody had $50. Thankfully, you did. Otherwise, who knows? It would have even made it on the record at that point.
He would have gone back home and told James, "I don't have a slot," and James might have said, "See ya."
Yeah, I mean, we I like to think we kind of would have made it happen somehow, but it still was just another one of these famous, infamous stories about those early days.
Right.
And then, of course, the big nightmare. People, I've been asked this a million times. Of course, it's like, how did it get misspelled, and how did Ron McGovney's name get misspelled? Well, it's very simple. Lars. Well, it didn't really matter where he gave me the credits, but he gave me the credits the last day in his handwriting. And I can't remember if I redid it, but I think I just gave the typesetter. And kids, if you don't know what a typesetter is, look it up on Google. Gave it to the typesetter who's setting all the type and everything for the album. And you didn't get to prove those things back then. You didn't get to see it before it's done. The first time I ever saw the whole record was when 2,500 of them were delivered to the record store I was working at. And I opened it up and looked at the cover, like, oh, this is really cool. Then I look at the back and go, oh no. They misspelled Metallica. And McGovney's name, I think they misspelled Magoonie because I think they thought the V was a U in the handwriting. But I don't know how that Metallica got misspelled. The only thing I can think of is the typesetter. It's not really a word, so maybe she just thought it should have 2 T's in it. I don't really know.
A made up word, yeah. It would sound better. Plus, wasn't Dave Mustaine's name on there too?
I can't on the original. No, not on the original one. On the original one, it was just James, Lars, and Lloyd Grant, I believe. I think that was it. And when we did the reissue later, we put the version from No Life to Leather on there, and that's the one where Mustaine and everybody's on there.
Gotcha.
Yeah, but I think I can't remember. But I know McGovney's name was on there because he was, he didn't play on the tape, obviously, but he was he was in the band at that point. So.
Right. They needed a bass player, and he was providing a lot of other assets. So
Yeah, he was an integral part. One I was on. It was funny. I was on Eddie Trunk's show recently, and we're talking about. I was telling a story about the first show Metallica ever, the second show Metallica ever played, but the first show they played opening for Saxon. Talking about that, and I had just assumed that Lars, because Lars was the one that usually made things happen, and I figured Lars probably somehow got the whiskey to put Metallica on, who nobody knew the hell they were at that point, opening for Saxon, which is a huge European band from the new wave of heavy metal we all loved. And McGovney was listening to the show and called in. He said, "No, that's not what happened. What happened was I had the demo, and I was going to the whiskey to try to get this gig, and I knew Nikki Sixx and Tommy Lee, and they were out front, and they said, 'What are you doing here?' I said, 'I'm trying to get a gig for my band,' and they were the ones that said, 'Oh, we know the booking agent,' brought him up, and the booking agent said, 'Yeah, sure, whatever.'"
And the irony is the tape he had was 2 cover versions of 2 new wave of British heavy metal bands, Killing Time and Let It Loose, which they played at that show as their own songs, right?
Well, that was the other great thing about that Saxon show, was that they were playing in between bands. They're playing those songs. They're playing up like 2 or 3 of those songs. And I remember Lars came running up to us going, oh my God, you got to tell the engineer to stop playing this song, because we're playing these songs later. So I think you had to go up and convince the guy to stop playing the
because I'm the one who gave him the tape. That was my new wave of British
it's your fault.
It was my fault. Because we walked in and they were playing Boston and REO Speedwagon and just or maybe there was a Van Halen or Black Sabbath track, and I knew the guy, and I said, "Hey, I've got this tape, and you might want to play this music, because these people here kind of hear this newer stuff." And so the tape was going, and Lars, was being as sharp as he is, was upstairs in the dressing room, and he heard it, and he came running down, and he's looking around. I think it had been like Angel Witch and Tigers, and then he came running up, and he said, "What's next? Is that your tape?" Yeah. What's next? And I said, "Savage, Let It Loose." He goes, "Fuck, take that out. We're playing that tonight." So, because they only had 2 original songs then. They had Hit the Lights, Jump in the Fire, and I think they debuted Metal Militia that night. But everything else was a cover version, a cover song. But they didn't say, "Hey, this is a song by Dominant." They just said, "Hey, this is Helpless," or "This is Let It Loose," or whatever. So, the jig was almost up, but he was smart enough to realize, I better get down there and figure out what's going on.
Yeah, that was hysterical.
That's such another Larsism.
Yeah, the lore of the early Metallica days is pretty incredible. I mean, pretty incredible. I mean, just the odds. That show, so that it was a Michael Schenker show at the Country Club where you ran into him at the parking lot afterwards. He went blank. So the crazy thing about that Michael Schenker show where you met Lars in the parking lot in December of 1980 was, so at that show, unbeknownst to a lot of other people, like all of the Metallica members were there. They didn't know each other.
I can't hear anything.
Oh, you can't hear me?
I hear Brian. I don't hear anything.
Can you hear me? No, I'll start again here.
Okay.
So the funny thing about that show where you first met Lars in the parking lot, the Michael Schenker Group show in December of 1980, was that unbeknownst to a lot of people that were there, not knowing each other, I think all the guys from Motley were there, and I don't think they might have known each other. All the Armored Saint guys were there. All the Metallica guys were there, not knowing each other. So there's a whole bunch of the local, I think, pretty much everybody that became like a metal band in LA was pretty much at that show, which is kind of another random, interesting piece.
It was an amazing show. It brought people together that just recognized the brilliance of Michael Schenker over right there.
Yep.
And it was just incredible who was there at that show, and what a great place to see a band. And I was in the parking lot after the show, just hanging out with my sister and watching people, and I noticed some little guy with a white shirt about 30 yards away, and he kind of turns out, and I kind of look, he turns away, then he turns back out, and he had this S with a blade running through it, and I went, fuck. And I said, I got to go talk to that guy. He's got a Saxon shirt on, and I thought you and I were the only people that knew who Saxon were in LA.
Exactly.
And there's some guy with a Saxon shirt on. I mean, and I went right up to him, and it's a little guy, and he looks up, and I go, you like Saxon? He goes, you know who Saxon are? And that's how it all started, is because of that T-shirt. And then I started talking about Angel. He goes, well, who else do you like? I said, Angel Witch, and he's like flipping out. And Bow Wow, and just of course Iron Maiden, blah blah blah. I said, I've never met anybody with a Saxon shirt. There's only like one other person that I think that kind of knows about this stuff, and that's how it all started, just because of his shirt. And I saw him a couple of years ago backstage after a SoFi show, and we talked for a few minutes as he's making his rounds, and then I kind of said goodbye, and I just turned back at him. I said, if you had a Black Sabbath or Judas Priest shirt on, I never would have talked to you. And he goes, yeah, none of this might have ever happened like that. And it's just like, it's amazing when you think about it, because they're so big now and 44 years later. And it's just amazing how life works. And these guys are going to be the biggest hard rock metal band ever.
Yeah,
in the history of that style of music overall.
I mean, certainly one of the biggest rock bands in history too. It's
and rock
crazy.
bands too. Yeah, I mean, not just metal, but rock. So yeah, it's incredible what they've accomplished.
Well, I think for him too, like we were like a godsend for him, because he came here from Denmark and didn't know anybody, just moved to the U.S. and it's not that easy for a kid that was I think he was 16 at the time. Or whatever.
Yeah, 16. Yeah.
And not thinking that anybody in LA is going to know anything about this scene, and then all of a sudden he meets us. It's like, oh my God, there are two guys that are into the same thing. And I remember I had the Diamond Head, white cover and all that stuff. That he's like, I can't believe you guys are into this. So it kind of worked out in an insane way. It's a funny story, kind of about that whole thing, where when Metallica was inducted in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, it was in Cleveland, which at first I was like, ugh. Cleveland. I mean, no offense, Cleveland. It's a beautiful city, but there's not a lot to do there. But it kind of worked out really well, because since there was nothing to really do there, all of us that were there kind of all hung out together. It was really the first time I spent a lot of time with Charlie Benanti and kind of became really good friends with him, just talking music. And so Metallica had a party. I can't remember if it was before or after. It might have been after the induction thing at the House of Blues, which was kind of right. We were all staying right near there, and so towards the end of the evening, probably like 2 or 3 in the morning, and we've had a couple of adult beverages, and we're just kind of talking, and like what's some room in there, and Lars just looks at me and goes, "How the fuck did all this happen?" Right? It's just so amazing. I just everybody's got that same story, but it's interesting when you're involved in it to see things, and you'd never in a random moment. I don't think none of us thought he was ever going to amount to being the drummer, one of the biggest bands of all time. Never.
He was just a record collecting buddy that was more obsessive than you and I. I mean, he was just annoying to a point where the guy at Moby Disc told me, "Don't bring in that annoying Dutch guy in here anymore. Keep him out of here." I said, "He's from Denmark." "I don't care. Keep him out of here. He's annoying." Because he'd go to every record store, want to go in the back room and start opening up boxes.
Yeah. He was over the top, which was I mean, look,
Lars,
what he says he's going to do something, he usually does it.
Yeah.
I want to talk about something a little bit different here, because we talked about Uli John Roth with Steve Stevens, by the way, a couple weeks ago. And I know you're a good friend of his, and I actually told Steve the story. So when you and I the first time we went to England was in 1982, and you had somehow struck up a friendship with Uli John Roth. And so we're over there, and you had talked to him, and next thing I know, we're on a train headed south to London to go to Uli John Roth's house. And I was like freaking out, because at that point, it's the first rock star I was ever going to meet, and he was so nice. Tell the whole backstory about how that happened.
I was just an obsessive fan of Uli and Michael Schenker back in the 70s, and just was obsessive. And that's why I was at the Michael Schenker group show. I think I got Uli's address from somebody, I don't remember who, and I just wrote him a letter, and I said, "Hey, I'm writing for this new heavy metal review magazine, and I'm going to be in Europe in the summer. Can I come and interview you?" And he writes, I got this letter back in this beautiful penmanship. "Yeah, sure. Here's my address, or here's my phone number," and arrange it. And so when you and I got to London, one of the things we did in between going to see John Durham or Jeff Barton or Venom or whoever at Newcastle was to go interview Uli for the new heavy metal review, and that's how it all started. And then we went down to Seaford, and he was living with Monica Danneman, and Hendrix pictures everywhere, and it was just like, wow, this is a rock star house. This is wild. Yeah.
And he was so unbelievably nice, just unbelievably nice. Yeah. And since then, you've gone on to do a lot of work with him. You've set up stuff for his live shows and done a bunch of different stuff with him.
He just wrote me the other day, and he goes, "Do you still have the videos from some Latin name or whatever?" And I was like, "Oh, what the hell is that?" And then It's the concert. I did all the video backplates for him in 1993, and I've got I've got the piece of paper right here. It says "Find Uli videos," so I don't forget. So I have to go in the shed and see if I still have them. He was just here. I just saw him 2 months ago. He was down at my brother's building having a Sky Academy. He'll be back in April. He's actually going to do a tour, and he'll start in LA. And he's just kind of like the big brother that's always needs help, and he's like, he just needs friends and help him keep creating music and touring and stuff. So, and he's a good guy. It's just I'm very, very comfortable with him. So I just stayed in touch with him forever. He's a lot easier to be around than Michael Schenker. I'll just say that.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we've all met Michael, and I mean, he's my favorite guitar player of all time. But
a little more complicated.
Guitar players.
I was with Uli when he was on that metal show, when Kurt Hammett said he'll do that metal show if you put Uli on. Uli had something to promote. Yeah, that was so. Yeah, he's just, again, another guy. You and I met him together, so I've known him since 1982, June or July when we were there. So.
That's crazy. Well, if he wants to do a podcast, let me know.
Oh, sure. Yeah. No, I actually probably would want to do one.
It'd be fun to do. So another funny story from back in the day. So when I was working at the record store, we'd always have people come in and hang out afterwards. Like, or one time Jakey Lee came in and played me some demos for Ozzy that were incredible and ended up being Bark at the Moon. And it would just hang out afterwards after closing. And you came in one time and closed up and said, "Hey, have something to play you. But you have to guess what it is. I'm not going to tell you. Yeah, I'm not going to tell you what it is. Don't give it away." So you start playing this, and I have no idea. I'm guessing, I'm thinking it's like some new British heavy metal band. And I was like, I couldn't figure it out after a couple of songs. I have no idea. He said, "That's the new Metallica demo." I'm like, "What?" Yeah. It was light years away from what Hit the Lights was.
So it was basically not this tape, but I queued past Hit the Lights because I knew you would know that song. So I queued it up to the Mechanics. And it was freaking amazing. As soon as I got it from Lars, I said, I get, make 10 copies and mail them out. Well, I made a copy for you, and I rolled out to Oz. And I guess you guys shut down at 8 or 9 at night. And I said, put this in. And yeah, it was like so much better than Hit the Lights from the Metal Massacre. I was like, how did they get so good so fast?
I couldn't believe it. I was like, oh my gosh, that is just incredible. From even, seeing them, because at that point, I think I'd seen them live once or twice.
Right. Yeah.
And, the new songs were good, and you can see they're starting to become band-ish, but I didn't expect that a demo that good. I'm like, holy cow, that was pretty incredible. And the fact that, I had no idea who it was.
That's the best part, waiting for you to realize. It's too hard to guess because you would never guess compared to the first Hit the Lights.
I just kept thinking, something in England or Europe or some new band over there. It sounded so much like that, which of course is why, they ended up being really big. And, it's such a bummer though, that they never really got a fan base in LA. I mean, it worked out perfect in the end with them moving to San Francisco with Cliff and the whole thing. But because I don't know how many times you saw them, but I saw them, I don't know, 6 or 7 times, Troubadour and all those places. And it just never, they started to get pretty good as a band, obviously, but the response was just very lukewarm at best. I don't think I ever saw a show with them where the fans went super crazy.
I agree with you. I mean, down here was the Motley Crues and the Rats and the leftover bands from the late 70s. But yeah, the intensity wasn't. It was a small core of people that really liked the heavy stuff. And San Francisco really embraced them, and they liked more of the heavy stuff. But and I have to say they got heavier by the 7th show. That's when James started playing guitar there. And when they added the 2nd guitar, that really kind of just amped up all the energy and stuff.
Well, I remember the Troubadour refused to book them because they thought they're a punk band. They were too heavy. So they couldn't play the Troubadour, but they played some of the Metal Massacre gigs that we put together at the Roxy with Bitch and Pandemonium. They were like the opening band, and still didn't work. So that was the crazy thing about San Francisco. When at the last minute I called them up and said, "Hey, I've got this show in San Francisco, and I think Mr. Thungle dropped out. Can you guys do it?" And they said, "Yeah, sure, why not?" So we went up there, and none of us had a clue what was going on up there. Like I think I'd been to maybe one show in San Francisco before that. I can't remember exactly, but we went up there and the kids went freaking crazy for them. They all had the demo. So they knew the band, they knew the songs. There's probably about 200 kids there. and it was unlike. I mean, they just went insane. Even the band couldn't believe it. We're like, what is happening here? It's a whole different scene up there. A lot heavier, obviously, because then you had the whole thrash scene come from there, and a lot of those guys were at that original show too.
Yeah, the Metal Church, Exodus, and it's just a different scene. I guess it's the environment. It's colder, it's grayer. It's just less sunny and no palm trees, right? So
that is true. That is very true. Yeah, it made sense. But it was crazy. But I remember, I'll never forget this one show. The show basically got banned from at the Troubadour was. They came out. I thought they were great, but there was, wasn't that many kids there, and I don't even know who else was on the bill. It might have just been them and a couple other local bands or something. And I thought they were great, but then I remember the booking agent afterwards says, that band can't play here anymore. They're too heavy. I'm like, they're too heavy?
They're too heavy.
and they were still. That was when they were still doing I think they had 3 or 4 originals, and they were still doing Blitzkrieg and some of the other stuff.
Oh, that'd probably be the summer of '82. Yeah, I think they played Troubadour once or twice in the summer of '82. They had that famous BAM ad where they had the summer tour. There was 6 shows or whatever. So one of them was at a place in North Hollywood called HJ's, which I was at. That's now a Chinese restaurant.
Oh wow!
It's across from FM Station, if you remember that place. But yeah.
Oh yeah, I unfortunately, I mean, we actually did shows there towards the end, but FM Station for a while was kind of just a weird, lame, sort of bar. But there's a flyer that is in the Metal Blade Museum in Las Vegas, Nevada, where Metallica was playing a show out in Anaheim, and they were a little bit better in Anaheim because the crowds out there were a little heavier, and Slayer was opening for them. And I was thinking for a minute, I don't really remember the show. I was talking to Kerry about that, and I go, I'm pretty sure I must have been there. And he said, yeah, you were there, but that's the only time that, of course, aside from the Big Four and whatever else, is the only time that they ever played together while Metallica was in LA.
Well, would that be the Woodstock or Radio City? Probably.
I think it was Woodstock or Radio City. One of the two. It was Metallica and
Slayer opening for Metallica.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, that was. Because that Slayer came obviously a little bit after them,
right.
So and that might have been the second time I saw Slayer. The first time I saw Slayer, they opened for Bitch out in Orange County, and this might have been the second or third show I saw. I forget that, but I had completely forgotten about that show. You'd think Metallica Slayer show you would remember back in the day,
but a lot of times that stuff didn't even register. I mean, it was so fresh and new, but at the same time, you don't think you're talking about a show you saw 40 plus years ago, right? And so it's kind of hard to remember. And you've probably been to thousands of shows. So
that's part of it. I remember a lot of the ones in LA, like the ones we did at the Roxy and those sort of the Metal Massacre shows where Metallica played. And I never forget that Troubadour show. It's pretty funny.
Well, I remember the first Metallica show, which is Radio City, and you just got a rubber stamp. There's 35 people.
Yep.
And they came out and they hit the whole opening chord of Hit the Lights, and Mustaine breaks a string. Yeah. So they just stop. He stops. And he had a backup guitar behind him, because I've talked to Ron McGovney about this. He had a 79 Gibson Les Paul Custom, which was Ron's guitar. It's his backup guitar, but he refuses to pick it up and get started. So he sits there and people wait while he puts a new string on his guitar. And James is just pacing back and forth. Nobody's saying anything. It's like, oh my God. That was the start of Metallica. Broken string.
Well, James was very shy, so that was
of course,
not surprising. I think I've told the story 1,000 times, but I think the first 2 or 3 times I met him, he might have said 3 words.
Yeah, same with me. When Lars brought him to my parents' house in May of '81, it's like, that's my friend James. He didn't say anything hardly. He liked the poster, he liked the Flying V, and he liked Kiss. And Lars hated Kiss, So we talked a little bit, and that was about it. And then stayed all night. Had my parents made dinner for him. He was eating my sister's chocolate chip cookies, and that's when he was sitting in the living room and he pulls out a 5th of Jack Daniels and starts downing it in my parents' living room. And it's like, put that away. My dad's going to kick my ass. What are you doing? I never seen anybody downing Jack Daniels, especially a 16-year-old.
Yeah, right.
I've never met before, and he's hanging out in my parents' living room. So very quiet, very, very alert, but no, he didn't say much. That's for sure.
Yeah, I missed that first Radio City gig. I don't remember why, but
I think you were working. I think we talked because I was going to drive down, and I think you had to work at Sears or wherever you were working at the time. So
yeah, probably. Yeah, that would make sense. Because I wouldn't get off on time to go. But
no, it was a long haul.
Obviously, went to the second one where they opened for Saxon, so which was quite quite insane. That still to this day, I go, it's amazing that they were able to do that. And I'm glad McGovney called into Eddie Trunk and righted the story so we know exactly how.
That's great. So he's listening and he's monitoring. That's good.
Yeah. He called in and he said that's not how it happened. We're like, oh, okay, cool. So,
well, I think because he was a photographer, he had taken some photos for Motley Crue, so that's how he knew the Motley Crue guys. So,
yep.
And he was up there and he had that demo, Killing Time, Let It Loose, and they're on a record called Metal Massacre. So
yep.
I think that, and that's, that put him over the top. And all the early flyers always said now appearing on Metal Massacre,
yep.
Before the High Velocity thing, which was later, but whatever that was. But it was Metal Massacre. So
yeah, well, that was, I mean, like we said over the years. I mean, at that point in time, it's that was not common for bands like that to be on a record. I mean,
nope.
That was the whole idea, was to like, well, let's do something like you said, like what they did with Metal from Others, these compilations in England, and try to help the scene in LA, because at that point nobody cared what was going on in the scene in LA.
Well, and the other thing is, if you're on a record, you must be better than the guys who are not on a record, right?
Yeah.
So that's half of it. You're on a record, you must be good or better than the other stuff that's out there.
Yeah, and both of us helped out quite a bit, Motley Crue as well, which neither of us have ever gotten any credit for. I remember the one thing. Was it you the one who met Sylvie Simmons, the writer for Sounds first?
She lived across from me, and we did all that press for them.
Yeah. She was great, and she was the Sounds correspondent, which Sounds was the main music magazine in England at the time, and they were the ones that coined the phrase "New Wave of Heavy Metal" and the whole thing. But we did, Sylvie, along with our help, did a big article on Motley Crue that came out, and sounds like a 3-page thing, and people in England went crazy for them.
And then we did a heavy metal roundup of LA bands, and I remember doing all that with Sylvie. And then we did a second version, and it appeared in Kerrang. And then by that point, her name was Laura Canyon, because she lived near Laurel Canyon, so she had a different name for Kerrang than she did for Sounds. And because by then Sounds was kind of not focusing on metal, and so we did a whole roundup, and that was Metallica's first press in Europe, with the little blurb in between Bitch and Steeler and Cirith Ungol and Warlord and all the other bands. And there was this little Metallica band that was moving up to San Francisco, and so.
Yeah, I remember when we went to England, like I mean, that was a great trip and it was a lot of fun, but the worst part of it was when we met Jeff Barton.
He didn't like it.
He was not the nicest guy on the planet. He hated the Metal Massacre record. I think they gave it like a no star or 1-star review or something in Sounds, which is devastating, because that was the Bible at the time, and we're just both like, what? This is horrible.
And we got an interview with him, we got to sit down with him in the Sounds office, and here we are with our record, and he didn't like it.
He didn't like it. And he was even like, I remember he was saying that he didn't even really like the new wave of British heavy metal. He was more into Kiss and the 70s stuff, but he just thought it was an interesting story. We're just, because like Jeff Barton is, if you don't know who he is, I mean, he was the one that coined the phrase "New Wave of British Heavy Metal," and he was the main writer at Sounds that was really pushing this whole scene. Maiden and Saxon and Diamond Head and Def Leppard, all of them. And then when we met him, and it was like, wow, that like puncture the don't meet your heroes, right?
Right. It was sad. Or then we went up to Neat Records, and then we were going out the back way, and we hear this noise, sound like the gutter was throwing up, and up comes, walking up the stairs, there's Venom, just the three guys from Venom. And I was like, are you guys for real? I remember asking Cronus if he believed in Satan, and he said, yeah, I do, or something. I was like, it's so surreal. We're standing in front of Venom, the guy who invented black metal. And it's like, oh my gosh. Or Tiger the Pantang or Raven and stuff. We saw them in Newcastle.
Yeah, we interviewed Raven. I remember I was trying to transcribe the tape, and they talked so fast with such an accent. I couldn't understand half of the things they said. It was impossible. On the Venom front too, by the way, Abaddon has written a book, and he was very nice and invited me to write the foreword, which I did.
Wow.
That book is out now. If you want to, I don't know if it ever came out in America, but you can buy it on Amazon as an import. So check that out from Venom. But yeah, pretty crazy.
Speaking of that trip, that's the Anvil case that you have.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and that's what I had 25 Metal Massacres in that. You had 25 Metal Massacres. And then we came back with our Pirates Booty. Remember, we were going through customs and bringing back records for Lars and for our friends and for ourselves.
That was the most nervous I think I've ever been in my entire life. We bought all these records. I literally I think we left our clothes there and just to put these records in the suitcase.
Exactly.
And we had to fly through Toronto and go through Canadian customs because it was so cheap. I remember standing there. The guy kept asking me, how much are these records worth? And I said, they're all used and they're, thrift stored. And they were only I think you could only bring like $300. I had no money, no credit card, no nothing. So I'm like terrified they're going to take my records away from me. And it took like 10 minutes. I just literally, I thought my heart was going to burst out of my chest. I was freaking out. And they finally let us go. I was like, oh, thank God.
Yeah, that was another trip, another story from that trip.
Yeah, that was crazy.
But
well, dude, thanks so much for doing this, man. This is a lot of fun to go back in the early days.
My pleasure. I really appreciate you having me do it with you. It was fun. It's nice to.
Yeah, you're an important part of the early days of Metallica. So it's always fun talking about that.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Thanks, man.
All right.
You can't leave yet, though, because we have to upload.